again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic? Let's do it. Serious. To anyone who likes to explore abandoned or run-down places, what's the scariest or creepiest thing you've seen on your adventures? Part 2. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I came across a very old, very smashed up VW bug in a ravine in the woods. It had been there a long time, since it was half buried in the mud. I started poking around the site and found dozens of old school style ladies' stockings, many tied together and disintegrating, scattered around. I found old Kodak film developing canisters. I found a bag of cement, completely hardened among other things. Plus, a year before I had found a very old ice pick close to the site. I got the chills and became a bit concerned. I had posted about this on Reddit years ago, but the general consensus was that the chassis was missing and it was just someone's garbage dump. But I still wonder about it. So much of the bug was scattered about and buried in mud. It was just so weird. 2 times out of the 100 or so adventures have ended in a scary situation. There's an abandoned hospital here that I explored a lot. I even spent the night in there a few times. It was incredibly intimidating from the outside, and not many people had the balls to go back in then. One night, I went in with a couple of friends, and we saw a sleeping bag on the ground that appeared to have a person in it, and one of the friends who had joined, complete idiot, thought it would be a good idea to kick the sleeping bag and see if someone was in it. Sure as shit, someone was in it. He jumped out of the sleeping bag, screaming at us. No words, just screams, and chased us out of there. The second time, I was at an abandoned factory. Huge factory. I had also been there a few times previously, made it inside, started taking photos, and then my friend asked if I could hear someone running. We waited and listened for a minute, and the running kept getting louder and closer. So we got out before we found out who it was running, or why they were running. Traveled to the lighthouse on one of the only undeveloped stretches of California coast, aptly and scarily named the Lost Coast. It was the middle of winter, the opposite of tourist season. I drove by myself to the hike. The Lost Coast alone hadn't had cell service in an hour at least, while driving to the trailhead over bumpy and partially flooded roads. Hike down the coastline through the mist and eventually come across a house on the coast that looks empty, but while walking near it, I start hearing noises that sound like doors opening and closing. I start running and realize that there's a large creek outlet into the ocean between myself and getting away from the house. I wade through, get soaked, and then about 100 yards down the beach, I look back to see an older man looking down the beach towards me. I'm already extremely creeped out and realizing that if someone wanted to kill me out here, I'm basically dead. Further down the beach, I can see the lighthouse through the fog, and I keep heading towards it. The building to the left in the picture is what I came to first, but it was getting dark, and the building creeped me out. I braced myself walking past it, and noticed that covering the far wall were many, many white handprints. I'm sweating bullets now, absolutely terrified, and scurried past the building towards the lighthouse. I peered into the windows of the lighthouse from a distance, but I couldn't make myself go into the building because in my mind, anything could be in there. Eventually, my terror subsides a bit, and I continue down the beach. The lighthouse is out of sight if I turn around, and it's getting late, so I'm thinking about where to set up camp. While I'm turned toward the ocean, I heard what sounded like a man's loud scream come from back toward the lighthouse. Didn't sleep a wink that night. I haven't been to this part of California. Anyone ever been there? Be happy to hear more about it. Sounds cool. My dad and I were exploring an abandoned mine in Arizona, and we weren't really prepared for it. While my dad was walking, he wasn't really paying attention to where he was going, and at the last second, I saw he was about to step into a vertical shaft. I grabbed him, pulled him back, and then we looked to see how far we would have fallen. It was about a 400-foot drop. It was back in high school. A couple of friends and I found some abandoned places and lived in a safe town, so we figured there wouldn't be any problems with it. Hindsight, we were dumb AF. I took a friend to an old abandoned house I'd never been to. It was just a two-story house out in the country, nothing too spooky on the inside. We walk in, and it's just a mess. Stuff was thrown about, just looked like the place was rummaged through. First floor couldn't hold my attention, so I figured I'd make my way up the stairs. On my way up on the wall is this rectangular door. Nothing too big, but I've never seen something like that before, so I opened it. Inside was an extremely small room. You could probably only squat in it. There were just odds and ends in there, things you'd expect to see in a storage that people typically don't use often. What caught my eye, though, was a paper drawing near the door. It was a stereotypical drawing of a girl and a sun, triangle dress, circle head, circle sun, lines for the sun's rays. Okay, kinda creepy, given it's an abandoned house, and then I turned it over. Now, my last name isn't very common where I live. Outside of family, I've never met someone with this last name. On the back of this drawing was written, Smacky. That was enough to make me flip out, leave, and drop urban exploring completely. In my hometown, there was an abandoned hospital called Cliveden Canadian Red Cross. Google it, it's great. We went for an excursion at midnight one night with a flashlight each. We explored for a while and heard a few bumps, but we put that down to animals scurrying around. The thing to note here is this place is off-road in the countryside. There's absolutely no artificial lights nearby. Without torches on, you cannot see anything, not even your hand in front of your face. We just finished exploring one of the two long corridors and then entered the chapel. Whilst in there, we heard noise that sounded like a metal bar being kicked on the floor coming from the main corridor. We turned off the light and peeked out into the corridor to see if we could see lights, but saw nothing. It was pitch black. You would know if someone was there, as they'd need a flashlight. It would be impossible to navigate without light and without walking into 100 hazards or objects. We waited a while and turned our torches back, looked down the corridor to see a single wheelchair right in the middle of the corridor where we previously just came from. This wasn't there before, and us being kids at the time, we shat ourselves and absolutely booked it out of there. On the way out, we thought we heard glass shattering, but again saw no torches or light sources. Never went back there at night again. A friend of mine and I used to love to explore abandoned places together. There was a house not far from us called Todd's Inheritance, which sat on an inlet where a creek meets the Chesapeake Bay. At the time, there was no electricity in it because it had been abandoned. This place is pitch dark at night. It's spooky enough during the day, but at night it took on that movie trope dark. Brooding house set in the middle of nowhere. Look, even though there's another property not far behind it, there is a small cemetery in front of it, and this huge oak tree that sort of blocks the view of it a little. It was in bad shape, but still standing. We were able to get in through one of the bottom floor windows that had been busted. The place was dank and smelled like hell. The room that we got into was kind of narrow, from what I could tell, that had a fireplace at one end. The night we went wasn't a particularly cold night, but the place was freezing. Naturally, the floors creaked. Since it was so dark, we couldn't see much other than the flashlights we had. It was more what we heard, creaking floorboards and the sound of wind through the broken windows. We found a door that we had some trouble opening. We made our way into the next room when we started hearing banging, followed by creaking floorboards. We just kind of stood frozen to the spot for a moment, trying to figure out where it was coming from. Suddenly, there was a louder bang, followed by this pounding sound up above. We panicked and, instead of heading back the way we came, we found what might be the most stereotypical haunted house staircase ever. If I didn't know better, I'd swear every ghost story was inspired by this house. We lost each other for a moment, but with this creaking noise still going on above, with intermittent pounding, it wasn't too long before we got back to that window. We hightailed it out of there. The place is now registered with the Maryland Historical Society and is open to the public as a museum. I'm glad someone came along to take care of it, because it really is on a beautiful piece of property. I do not believe in ghosts, so I like to feel better by telling myself what we heard that night was either the wind slamming some doors open around, or possibly a homeless person who decided that was a good place to stay. Either way, it was an experience. So when I hear things that sound interesting were preserved by a historical society, that makes me happy. Hopefully, many people will get to enjoy it now, safely. There used to be a house just behind our property when I was a kid. It was abandoned. The lady who lived there died some 30 years ago, and no one ever bothered with the house. It was seriously run down. All the windows were broken by vandals, storms had blown stuff all over the place, the floors were water damaged and warped, the paint was flaking off everywhere, and it smelled strange. The back area had a shed with what I presumed were jars of canned vegetables that were so old they'd begun to molt. The creepy vibe was very strong, and when me and my siblings went to explore it, we all had a strong feeling we were being watched. Now, my brother and sister had their own unexplained experiences, but I'll share mine. In the upstairs room and at the top of the stairs, there was an old hospital bed with a stained mattress. There were also shelves full of books, interesting books that were going to waste. A few of them had very neat covers, and the pages were ruined, so I thought I would salvage the covers for a journal or something. Anyway, I gathered up a few books I felt I could be salvaged and laid them on the bed. Bear in mind, my brother and sister were in the very next room. I could see them the whole time while they were trying to make their way out onto the balcony. One of them called for me to help move an old TV, so I went and helped. Again, I could see them the whole time. They never left that room. Now I shit thee not, when I got back to the book room, those books were back on the shelf. To this day, I have no rational explanation. I never went back to that house. Spent the day at my then girlfriend's house. Her grandmother, Margaret, lives in a secondary home on the same property located in the backyard. We were casually watching baseball on the couch when her grandma came over with a terrified look on her face. The only two people occupying her house is herself and my wife's cousin, Kyle. When you open the door to her home, you immediately enter the kitchen. From her front door, you see her kitchen, her bedroom, and finally her bathroom, all in the same field of view, all separated by walls and doorways. She began to explain how she had just gotten home and announced herself to Kyle since she saw the bathroom door closed, the light on, and the shower running upon entry to the kitchen. Kyle didn't respond as he usually would, so she announced herself a second time. She described an eerie silence, which led her to call Kyle on the phone. Kyle answers the phone and tells her he's currently out of the house with friends. We then all came over to Margaret's house equipped with a baseball bat, 4 adult males, 4 adult women, and the police en route. Father-in-law, skilled boxer, went up to the bathroom door and tried to open it, but notices that the doorknob is being held stiff on the other side. We all know the door is locked. Show is running, light is on, and the sink was also running. Unable to open the door, he steps outside still waiting for the cops. Kyle now gets home extremely enraged about the situation. He takes off his shirt as he steps forwards toward the bathroom and starts to threaten whoever was in there. But still, no response. 2 police finally arrive and also notice the light is on, shower and sink running. They announce themselves outside the bathroom door as loud as possible with guns drawn. Officer 1 tests the doorknob and violently opens the door to clear this tiny bathroom. No one is found inside the bathroom. The bathroom window is 4 inches in height, 12 inches in length. A leprechaun wouldn't be able to clear that. The officers noticed the light was turned off, shower was off, door wasn't locked anymore, but the sink was still running. They were as terrified as we were and told us we experienced something supernatural and there wasn't anything they could do, clearly. Extended family care down the next day, curious about the situation. My wife's brother recreated the situation to his aunt at Margaret's house to let her know how it all went down. He turned on the shower, turned on the sink, the light, and left the door unlocked for dramatic reasons. He announced himself like the police officers did and opened the door. Both shower and lights turned off. That's pretty creepy. I don't know, maybe reading it just didn't make a lot of sense to me, but that sounds pretty wild. Weird. We were playing Airsoft in an old but huge factory with many floors and very high ceilings, like 10 meters high, in some rooms and more normal heights in others. So we start playing a quick game in one of the upper floors. I see my friend 20 meters away. He's trying to move a big metal drawer that is on the floor to hide behind, and all of a sudden he disappears. Me and my other friend run like hell, and we see a hole. The drawer was put there to cover it, and my friend fell through. I thought he fell over 10 meters to the lower floor and was dead. I take a look down the hole. Hopefully there was a normal height floor just under this part of the room, and he only fell for 2 to 3 meters onto some concrete blocks, got a few bruises, and a good story to tell.